Homang, Charlie Smith, Jong Benji, Georgia Strait, chief editor of the Georgia Strait newspaper, and I'm happy to be here with WOW TV for another weekly installment of What's in the News. I'm going to start with an interview that I did this week in the Georgia Strait with Ken Greenberg, and he's an architectural and urban planning consultant from Toronto, and he was talking about the increasing popularity of living downtown. And this is taking place across North America. It's not just in Vancouver. And he was saying that the most popular areas for real estate now are these areas of town that were built before the Second World War. So that was 1939 to 1945, because they're more walkable. So these older areas, and you can think in Vancouver of, say, Strathcona or the West End, that these areas of cities, more and more people are moving to. And there are lots of reasons for this. And one is the first people to really adopt the downtown living. It used to be that mainly the poor lived downtown, but that's changed, particularly in Vancouver since Expo 86, which was the World's Fair. But one of the trends, it was the young people who started it, young singles, young couples, and empty nesters, people whose kids had moved out of home, and they wanted to downsize, so they'd buy these condos downtown. And what happened was, as they moved in and more services became available, now more and more people are wanting to move downtown. Part of the issue is driving habits. That is, the Lower Mainland is getting more congested. Fewer people don't want to spend all this time commuting. So the traditional North American dream was a house in the suburbs with a two-car garage, several bedrooms, and you'd go there, you'd go to the suburbs to live, you'd come downtown to work, and maybe you'd drive somewhere else to get your groceries. Well, that's becoming increasingly challenging for people and time-consuming. And some of the younger people who grew up in the suburbs, that they find the suburbs are a little bit sterile. They're not as exciting as the downtown urban cores. And so, they spend a lot of time growing up sitting in the car waiting for their parents, and they like moving downtown. So another issue is that young people are not driving as much. They're not, in terms of the driver's licenses, the percentage of young people 18 to 24 with a driver's license in British Columbia has actually dropped 10% as a percentage of the whole population between 1994 and 2011. And part of the reason for that is the young people are going to university, they're going to college, they get a U-Pass, which is a pass that enables them to travel on transit at a much lower rate. And so they get their U-Pass when they go to school, they get used to that. They're very concerned about the environment and the impact of driving on the environment, but it's also a time thing. And they're investing more of their own money in their cell phones and communicating that way, and maybe doing car sharing. So you're having fewer people driving, and then when you don't have a car, you want to be able to walk to your destination. Another factor driving this trend is the older people, that they also start to drive less when they get into their 50s and their 60s. We've got a huge baby boom of population that's reaching that age right now. And so I was talking to someone I know recently, 59 years old. He was living in Port Coquitlam and decided to move down to Powell Street, just on the edge of the downtown east side, because he felt that he could walk to different locations and life gets a little easier. The challenge this is creating is people in the downtown east side, and particularly people who advocate for the poor, are saying that the poor are getting pushed out of their traditional neighborhood. And this is something that led to a huge demonstration actually earlier this week, where you had more than 200 people at the corner of Main and Hastings. But you can see the popularity of downtown living too, with the increasing number of condos in Chinatown in Vancouver. So it's these older areas of the city that are increasingly popular. It's led to a bit of a real estate rush along the Hastings Street corridor, and it's also creating demonstrations and protests. And I think we're going to see more of this. One of the things Ken Greenberg was pointing out is that what's been happening and what he expects to happen is that the poor are going to be increasingly kind of pushed out to the suburbs. And the problem when they get to the suburbs is the suburbs were built with the automobile in mind, and there isn't necessarily the same transportation options. That's a little different in Burnaby because Burnaby has 11 SkyTrain stations. But you get out to Surrey, there's only 4 SkyTrain stations, and there's no SkyTrain in Coquitlam or Pitt Meadows or Maple Ridge. So the transportation becomes difficult because if they don't have a car and they're poor, then it becomes tougher to even buy your groceries and live your life. Whereas when the poor are living downtown, they can live without a car and they still have better access to services and social services as well, including things like food kitchens and shelters and things of that nature. So this is a major societal trend that's underway, and it's something that at the Georgia Strait we're paying close attention to. Another story we did in the paper this week involved the first Green MLA, Andrew Weaver, who's a climate scientist at the University of Victoria, and he was elected to represent Oak Bay Gordon Head in the legislature. One of the things the NDP and the Liberals, the two major parties in British Columbia, agree on is exporting liquefied natural gas to Asia. So they're both supporting this plan. The Malaysian company Petronas announced a $16 billion investment this week. So there's a lot of excitement in the business community about this, but Andrew Weaver says that the problem is there's so much natural gas in the world, and Asia is going to have lots of access to it, and that the price won't be high enough to justify all the investments being done in British Columbia. So he's looking at this with considerable suspicion, and he's kind of alone on this because there hasn't been a lot of questions or criticism from the two mainstream parties in British Columbia. And the third thing I wanted to talk about was Summer in the City, which is our annual issue, which is kind of the ultimate guide to entertainment. And Janet Smith will be by in a minute, our arts editor, to talk about the arts festivals. But this week's issue deals with food festivals, all sorts of summer activities, charity runs you can get involved in. If you're sitting at home and you're alone, there's no shortage of things you can do to get more involved in the community. So one of the things that happens is a lot of the health organizations like to hold runs or sporting events to raise money for charities. So people who like golf can golf to help, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is a degenerative nerve disease. If you like to run, there's the BC Cancer Foundation has something called the Underwear Affair, where people, they actually wear their underwear and they go running in the streets of Vancouver, and it's quite a fun event. There's a ride to conquer cancer, so you can get on your bike and cycle from Vancouver all the way to Seattle. So if you pick up the Georgia Strait, you'll see some of these events. Other things that are going on this summer are the multicultural festivals. So July 7th and 8th in downtown Vancouver on Granville Street, the Latin American community comes together for Carnaval de Sol. And also in the summer, you've got Caribbean Days, which is another major festival. So if you pick up the Georgia Strait, you'll see lots of opportunities to have some fun this summer and get more involved. And you can also learn about kiteboarding and diving and some of the outdoor sporting activities that are taking place across the region.